You are a federal prohibition agent in Chicago in October 1926, and Treasury Inspector Samuel Garrett arrives in 72 hours to audit cash movements that match your bank deposits but not your salary, what the Bureau calls corruption investigation, and what you call the moment when 14 months of Thursday envelopes stop being operational arrangement and become evidence for termination. Not because taking bribes was the problem, because documenting them in 3 separate banks under fabricated names creates the specific paper trail that investigators prefer. Here's what 72 hours actually cost when every arrangement you built to survive on $1,800 a year in a city where Al Capone spends $500,000 a month bribing law enforcement becomes Exhibits A through G in a termination hearing. If sleep stories built on impossible choices help you drift off, hit subscribe and we'll keep building them. The telegram arrives at District Supervisor Harold Meck's desk at 9 o'clock on October 14, 1926. Treasury Inspector Samuel Garrett specializes in corruption investigations and has terminated 47 agents in 18 months across 6 districts. Your hand stops mid-reach for the coffee cup. The weight in your interior jacket pocket is $1,400 in small bills collected Thursday evening from Frank DeLuca's establishment on North Clark Street, payment for advance notice of federal raids you helped plan. Meck's door opens. He calls your name. The elevated train passes outside the district office windows with the rumble that has marked every morning since your transfer to Chicago in March 1925. The sound continues. Your coffee sits untouched. You stand and cross the 20 feet of worn floor between your desk and Meck's office, with the envelope pressing against your ribs through wool and cotton. This is what a revolution looks like 2 years before anyone calls it that. Meck sits behind a desk that holds 3 file folders, a telephone, and an ashtray containing the remains of his morning cigar. He does not gesture to the chair. You close the door. The district office noise, typewriters, voices, filing cabinet drawers becomes muffled. Meck slides a single sheet of Western Union paper across the desk toward you. You read it standing. The text is Administrative Brevity. Treasury Inspector Samuel Garrett arrives Chicago, October 17th. Stop sealed audit files covering district enforcement activity, March through September 1926. Stop all agents available for interview. Stop all financial records preserved pending review. Stop Bureau Chief William Anderson authorizes full cooperation. Stop. Reply confirmation receipt. Stop. 72 hours from this moment, to Garrett's arrival, you set the telegram back on the desk surface with care that costs effort. Anything in your operational record that might require explanation before Garrett arrives, Meck said. No, you said. Meck's gaze holds yours for 3 seconds that extend longer than their actual duration. He nods once. The gesture contains no information you can pass. His hand moves to retrieve the telegram. The paper disappears into the center desk drawer. The drawer closes with a click that marks the end of the exchange. You return to your desk. The coffee has cooled. The elevated train passes again. The schedule runs every 11 minutes during morning hours. Through the window, Chicago continues its operational rhythm. Trucks unload at the warehouse across the street. A man in a camel coat walks past carrying a briefcase. The city at 10 o'clock on a Wednesday morning in October looks exactly as it looked at 9. The envelope in your pocket weighs 4 ounces. $1,400 in 5s and 10s. Standard denominations for a payment structure that has functioned without incident for 14 months. DeLuca counts carefully. You have never received incorrect change. The arrangement operates with the precision of legitimate business, because both parties understand that precision is what prevents questions. The telephone on your desk rings. You answer. The voice belongs to the federal courthouse clerk, confirming that next week's warrant processing will require your signature on Tuesday afternoon. You acknowledge. The call ends. You return the receiver to its cradle and open the center drawer of your desk. where the operational calendar sits beneath a stack of blank report forms. Clarence Webb sits 3 desks away. He transferred from the Ohio District Office 6 weeks ago. 24 years old, first federal posting, still treats the Bureau Manual as a document that describes actual procedure rather than theoretical structure. He has been watching you with the careful attention of a man learning how the work is actually done, and you have been conscious of his observation, in the way you are conscious of a sound that might be nothing or might be something that requires response. Webb's desk holds a neat stack of completed case files. He types with the methodical precision of someone who believes the paperwork matters. You have not determined whether this belief is genuine or performed. Both possibilities create complications if Garrett's audit includes interviews with recent transfers who have not yet learned which observations are recorded and which are not. The Thursday envelope cannot remain in your pocket through 72 hours of normal operational activity. The weight has become conspicuous now that its meaning has shifted. You stand, collect your coat from the rack beside your desk, and inform the duty officer that you are conducting a routine district inspection. He notes the departure time in the logbook. You leave through the front entrance and descend the stairs to street level, where Chicago wind off the lake cuts through November air with the cold that comes before snow. The bank is 4 blocks north. You have 3 accounts. One uses your wife's maiden name, Margaret Sullivan, rather than Margaret Donovan. She signed the documents in April 1925, understanding only that federal agents receive occasional payments for testimony in district court cases, and that separate accounts simplify tax preparation. The second account uses your brother's name. He lives in Boston, and has not asked questions about the quarterly deposits that arrive with explanations involving investment returns. The third account belongs to a fabricated business entity that exists only on paper, a consulting service with a Michigan address that receives payment for services never rendered. The deposits match Frank DeLuca's ledger entries exactly if both records are placed side by side. You have never seen DeLuca's ledger, but you know it exists because he mentioned it once in January, during a conversation about tax preparation, explaining that accurate record-keeping was the difference between manageable exposure and catastrophic audit. The pride in his voice when he described his accounting system was the pride of a man who understood that documentation protects against the chaos of memory. That ledger now represents the primary threat. Garrett will obtain DeLuca's records through subpoena or raid. He will obtain your bank records through federal authority. The comparison will require approximately 15 minutes to complete. You reach the bank. The teller recognizes you. You make the deposit to the Sullivan account with the explanation that court testimony payments have arrived on schedule. The teller processes the transaction without comment. The receipt goes into your wallet. The weight in your pocket disappears, but the knowledge of what the weight represented does not. 72 hours. The elevated train schedule, the warrant processing, the routine district inspections, all continue as though the telegram had not arrived. You return to the office. Webb is still typing. Mech's door remains closed. The district operates with the steady rhythm of an institution that has mastered the appearance of function. Your coffee sits cold on your desk. You pour it into the waste bin and refill the cup from the pot in the corner. The liquid is hot enough to burn if you drink too quickly. You sip carefully and open the operational calendar to review next week's planned enforcement actions. Garrett arrives Sunday evening. The inspection begins Monday morning. Between this moment and that arrival, you must continue standard operations while determining which records can be destroyed, which witnesses can be convinced to forget specific details, and whether requesting DeLuca's cooperation will create more exposure than allowing the ledger to remain in his safe. The telephone rings again. You answer. The work continues. You leave the office at 6. The elevated train carries you south through the district where 30,000 speakeasies operate with the visibility of legitimate establishments. Neon signs, doormen, music bleeding through floor gratings into the street. The city has not made Prohibition invisible, only unofficial. Your apartment is 12 blocks from the district office. Margaret has dinner waiting. Pot roast, potatoes, bread, still warm from the oven. She asks about your day. You tell her the work was routine. This is accurate in the technical sense. The Thursday collection, the deposit, the return to standard operations. These actions constitute routine. The telegram in Mech's desk drawer does not change what you did today. It changes what those actions mean. Margaret talks about the neighbor's daughter who is getting married in December, about the cost of winter coats, about whether the Plymouth needs new tires before snow arrives. You listen and respond at appropriate intervals. The conversation requires minimal attention. You have practiced this division of consciousness for 18 months. The ability to maintain domestic normalcy while calculating operational risk. The pot roast is excellent. Margaret cooks with the precision she applies to household accounting. Every recipe measured, every expense tracked. She manages the household budget with care that makes your federal salary function as though it were larger than $1,800 annual. She does not know about the Sullivan account deposits. She signed the paperwork believing the explanation you provided, and that belief has been sustained through careful compartmentalization of information. After dinner you sit in the front room while Margaret clears the dishes. The radio plays dance music from the Palmer House. Through the window, Chicago continues its evening rhythm. Cars pass. Streetlights illuminate the intersection. A man walks past, with his collar turned up against the wind. The ordinary texture of a Wednesday night in October. The Thursday envelope from DeLuca weighs approximately 4 ounces and represents $1,400 in small bills. Your weekly federal salary weighs less. The metaphor writes itself. Margaret joins you in the front room with mending. She works in comfortable silence, needle moving through fabric with practiced efficiency. The radio shifts to a news program. The announcer discusses city council proceedings, a factory opening in Gary, weather predictions for the weekend. Margaret listens while she sews. You watch her hands work and calculate what she will need to understand if Garrett's audit proceeds to termination and prosecution. The Sullivan account contains $18,000 accumulated over 14 months. Margaret believes this money represents testimony payments and modest investment returns. The explanation will not survive federal scrutiny. She will learn that her signature on bank documents established her as a knowing participant in a corruption scheme, regardless of her actual knowledge. Federal prosecutors do not distinguish between genuine ignorance and performed ignorance when building conspiracy cases. You have not determined how to explain this to her. The conversation requires you to admit that 18 months of domestic stability was constructed on income she did not know was illegal, and that her signature on papers she trusted was the signature that will implicate her if Garrett's investigation proceeds to indictment. Margaret finishes the mending and folds the fabric. She stands, kisses your forehead and tells you she is going to bed. You tell her you will be up shortly. She climbs the stairs. The bedroom door closes. You sit in the front room with the radio playing low and the street light illumination coming through the window. Garrett is traveling now. His sealed audit files contain bank records, enforcement statistics, arrest patterns that diverge from reported activity. Somewhere between Washington and Chicago, the train carries documentation that cannot be explained through operational abstractions. 72 hours is not sufficient time to explain 18 months of careful omission. You turn off the radio. The apartment settles into silence broken only by the building sounds. Pipes, floorboards, the couple upstairs moving through their evening routine. You climb the stairs. Margaret is already asleep. You undress in darkness and slide into bed beside her. Her breathing is steady. The warmth of her body next to yours is the warmth of a life that functions because she does not know what it is built on. Sleep does not arrive immediately. You lie in darkness calculating the distance between this moment and Sunday evening, when Garrett steps off the train from Washington, with sealed audit files containing information that cannot be explained away through operational abstractions. Thursday morning, the district office operates at standard tempo. You arrive at 8. Mech is already at his desk. Webb types case reports. The duty officer logs incoming telegrams. The elevated train passes outside with mechanical regularity. You have 3 enforcement actions scheduled for today. A warehouse inspection on South Halstead. A follow-up interview with a speak-easy operator who was cited last month for permit violations. A coordination meeting with the district attorney's office regarding next week's court calendar. All routine. All documented. All continuing as though the audit countdown were not running. The immediate problem is documentation. Frank DeLuca keeps a ledger in the safe at his North Clark Street establishment, recording every Thursday payment in his careful accounting hand with dates and amounts that will match your bank deposits exactly if Garrett obtains both records. You have never seen the ledger, but you know it exists, because DeLuca mentioned it once in January when discussing tax preparation. The ledger cannot be destroyed without DeLuca's cooperation, and requesting its destruction means admitting that Treasury is investigating you, which means DeLuca will understand that the arrangement is ending, and may decide to cooperate with Garrett to reduce his own exposure. This calculation sits at the center of the operational problem. DeLuca is a businessman. His speakeasy on North Clark Street operates with the efficiency of a legitimate enterprise because he has invested in the proper protections. Monthly payments to local police. Weekly payments to the ward organization. Thursday payments to federal agents who provide advance warning of planned raids. The system functions because all parties honor their commitments. Requesting that DeLuca destroy evidence breaks the fundamental rule of the arrangement that both parties accept equal risk. You are asking him to increase his exposure to protect you. And the only reason you would ask is because federal investigation has made the arrangement catastrophically dangerous. A businessman who understands this will calculate that cooperation with Garrett offers better odds than loyalty to a federal agent who is about to be terminated. You complete the warehouse inspection by 11. The facility is empty. The owner was cited 3 weeks ago for possession of industrial alcohol without proper documentation. He has not returned since the citation. The warehouse contains nothing except dust and the smell of old grain. You file the report noting that the premises remain abandoned and that further enforcement action is not warranted. The follow-up interview is scheduled for 2 o'clock. You have 90 minutes. You walk north on Halstead toward Clark Street. The November wind has intensified. The cold carries the lake smell, water and ice, and the industrial residue of stockyard operations mixing with the city. DeLuca's establishment occupies the ground floor of a 3-story building with a tailor shop front. The tailor operation is legitimate. The speakeasy operates through a door at the back of the shop that leads to a basement room where liquor is served to customers who understand that the cover charge includes discretion. The system is not subtle. The system does not need to be subtle because enforcement depends on federal agents who are paid to look elsewhere. You descend the stairs at 1:15. The basement room is empty except for DeLuca wiping down the bar. He looks up when you enter. His expression shifts from professional welcome to careful attention. You are not here on Thursday. The timing itself is information. Office, DeLuca said. You follow him through the back door into a small room containing a desk, filing cabinet and safe. DeLuca closes the door. The room muffles the basement silence. He does not offer you a seat. The meeting has already deviated from standard operational pattern. You explain that Treasury is conducting a routine audit of district enforcement activity and that all financial records are being reviewed. You do not mention Garrett by name. You do not mention terminations or sealed files. You present the audit as administrative procedure, the kind of bureaucratic exercise that requires careful documentation but does not indicate actual investigation. DeLuca listens without interruption. His face reveals nothing. When you finish, he nods once. The ledger, he said, would need to reflect only legitimate business expenses, you said. DeLuca's silence extends 3 seconds. His gaze holds yours with the flat assessment of a man calculating odds. He built this operation through careful risk management. The ledger exists because accurate records protect against the chaos of disputed memory. You are asking him to destroy the protection he constructed. Treasury audit covers what period? DeLuca said. March through September. 14 months of arrangement, 6 months of audit window. Yes. DeLuca turns to the safe. His hands work the combination with practiced motion. The door swings open. Inside you can see stacked cash papers and a leather-bound ledger. He does not remove the ledger. He leaves the safe open so you can see it, a demonstration that the evidence exists, and that its existence is his choice to maintain or eliminate. Request assumes audit is routine, DeLuca said. Treasury doesn't audit routine. Treasury audits problems. You do not respond. The silence becomes confirmation. Garrett, DeLuca said. The name itself is information you did not provide. DeLuca knows who conducts corruption investigations. He knows the name before you spoke it. This means other agents have already had this conversation, and DeLuca has been calculating odds across multiple variables. Thursday arrangement ends today, DeLuca said. Ledger reflects legitimate consulting payments through September. October entries do not exist. You were never here this afternoon. He closes the safe. The door locks with mechanical precision. The ledger remains inside, entries intact, your exposure undiminished. You stand in the small office while DeLuca waits for you to leave. The negotiation is complete. He has made his choice. Cooperation with Garrett offers better protection than loyalty to an agent whose operational value has expired. You return to the basement stairs. The room is still empty. You climb to street level and emerge into November cold. The walk back to the district office takes 20 minutes. Your hands are numb by the time you reach the building entrance. The follow-up interview proceeds as scheduled. The speakeasy operator confirms that he has resolved the permit violations cited last month. You file the report. The coordination meeting with the district attorney's office runs 30 minutes. Court calendar confirmed. Warrant processing confirmed. Standard operational procedure maintained. You return to your desk at 4:30. Webb is still typing. Meck's door opens briefly. He steps out, speaks to the duty officer, returns to his office. The door closes. District Supervisor Harold Meck has been in his office since morning, with the door closed. The 11 other agents in the district office whose deposit patterns match yours are maintaining their operational schedules. 60 hours remain until Garrett's arrival. The ledger sits in DeLuca's safe with 14 months of careful accounting. Your bank deposits match those entries. The arrangement that sustained 18 months of income is now the documentation that will sustain your termination. The elevated train passes outside. You file the afternoon reports. The work continues. You watch Webb type from across the room. 2 fingers. The keys strike with even rhythm. He does not pause between words. The report forms in real time, one sentence after the previous sentence. No corrections visible in the movement of his hands. He has been in Chicago 6 weeks. The reports he files follow bureau format exactly. Incident location, time of enforcement, subjects detained, contraband seized. Each word means what it says. When he writes raid, he means a discrete operation with beginning and end. When he writes confiscation, he means property removed from illegal possession and processed according to regulation. You turn back to your own typewriter. The form in front of you requires Thursday's enforcement summary. Location: North Clark Street establishment. Time: 11:30 p.m. Subjects detained: none. The language exists to document work that did not happen in the way the words describe. Webb stands, crosses the room. stops beside your desk. "Where do you conduct your Thursday morning enforcement work?" Webb said. "You do not look up from the typewriter. Meeting confidential informants," you said. He waits. The silence extends long enough that you glance toward him. His expression shows nothing except attention to what you have said, and expectation that you will say more. "Standard surveillance follow-up," you said. "Tracking distribution patterns, building cases." "The reports show consistent Thursday activity," Webb said, "but the arrest records don't match the surveillance hours." Your hands remain on the typewriter keys. That's how informant work operates. Hours logged don't always produce immediate arrests. He nods once. Returns to his desk. The typing resumes. You finish the form, remove it from the machine. The paper joins 16 other Thursday reports in your desk drawer, each one documenting enforcement that occurred according to bureau definitions, while describing operations that functioned according to arrangements those definitions cannot acknowledge. The envelope from Frank DeLuca this morning weighed 4 ounces. Tomorrow morning Webb will file his weekly summary. District Supervisor Harold Meck will review both reports, yours and Webb's, and notice the same inconsistency Webb noticed. Meck has been in Chicago 8 years. He understands what the inconsistency means. He also understands that Inspector Garrett will ask him to explain why he noticed nothing for 18 months, until a new agent pointed it out. Clarence Webb has been in Chicago for 6 weeks, and still writes reports that assume words like raid and confiscation refer to single discrete events rather than ongoing business relationships. Someone will need to explain this to him eventually, possibly Inspector Garrett. The afternoon continues. Other agents file their reports. The elevated train passes outside the window with its familiar rumble. The district office processes paperwork that transforms Chicago's 30,000 speakeasies into 14 arrests per month, which represents the number of establishments that fail to maintain their arrangements or pay on time. 3 desks away, Agent Kowalski watches Webb with the expression of someone calculating whether the new agent represents threat or merely inconvenience. The calculation matters. The 11 other agents in the district office whose deposit patterns match yours are performing the same assessment at their own desks, behind their own careful attention to paperwork. Webb pulls his completed report from the typewriter, reads it once, files it in the outgoing box. His work is finished. Yours is not. The clock on the wall shows 2:15. 67 hours until Garrett's train arrives. The Thursday envelope sits in your jacket pocket, still undistributed to the 3 bank accounts that document its monthly journey with the precision investigators require. You leave the office at 2. LaSalle Street carries the afternoon traffic of men leaving work early. Hats angled against October wind that moves between the buildings with the same cold precision it carried this morning. First National Bank sits 3 blocks south. The entrance is brass and marble. The interior smells like paper and floor wax, and the particular silence that accumulates in spaces built to hold money. You approach the counter where the teller greets you by name. "Afternoon, Mr. Morrison," she says. "Not Agent Morrison, not sir." Your actual surname, spoken with the easy recognition of someone who has seen you 14 times in 14 months, always on the same day, always making the same deposit. "Need to access the account," you say. She retrieves the ledger. The name on the account is Margaret Henley, your wife's maiden name. The balance is $6,400. Deposits of $450 appear monthly since September 1925. Each entry documented in the bank's permanent records. Each deposit occurring on the Friday following your Thursday meeting with Frank DeLuca. The arithmetic is simple enough that investigators will not need interpretation. You close the ledger. "Thank you." "Of course, Mr. Morrison." Back onto LaSalle Street. The wind has not changed. Continental Illinois is 2 blocks north. The lobby is larger, the marble darker. A different teller. same recognition. Back again, he says. This account uses your brother's name, Thomas Morrison of Springfield, Illinois. Balance, $7,200. Same deposit pattern, same timing, same dates that match the account at First National. Inspector Garrett's files track bank deposits across 6 districts. His method involves comparing deposit dates to enforcement reports, identifying patterns that suggest income sources not explained by federal salary. 3 accounts deposited on the same Friday each month will appear in his documentation as Exhibit C, systematic rather than sporadic income pattern. The third bank is Chicago Trust, smaller building, less marble. The account name is Lakeside Commercial Services, a business entity that exists only in incorporation papers filed in November 1925. Balance, $6,000. All 3 accounts show deposits on the same day each month. It seemed like efficiency at the time. 1 day of banking instead of 3 separate trips. Simple routine instead of complicated scheduling. What investigators call evidence emerges from patterns exactly like this one. Multiple accounts, regular intervals, amounts that remain consistent enough to suggest systematic rather than sporadic income. You walk north on LaSalle Street, the businessmen around you are heading home, their day is finished. They will eat dinner with their families, and read newspapers, and sleep, without calculating whether paper trails created 18 months ago can be severed in 72 hours. Your wife signed the bank documents without asking why the account used her maiden name. She trusted that you understood financial arrangements in ways she did not need to understand. Her signature appears on forms that investigators will interpret as evidence of conspiracy, rather than evidence of trust. The elevated train rumbles overhead. Thursday envelope weight sits in your jacket pocket. 4 ounces. $1,400 in bills that will become $450 deposited here. $450 at Continental, Illinois. $500 at Chicago Trust. The pattern will continue, because the pattern is how the arrangement functions. Unless the pattern stops being sustainable between this moment and Saturday evening. You walk north on LaSalle Street, through afternoon cigar smoke from the businessmen leaving their offices early. The smoke settles into your wool coat fabric the way it has settled every afternoon since you arrived in Chicago. The smell is tobacco and city heat and the particular weight that October carries when it knows winter is coming. State Street is 2 blocks east. The address on the incorporation papers for Lakeside Commercial Services is a postal box in a building that houses 60 other postal boxes, serving 60 other entities that may or may not conduct actual business. The monthly rental is $3. The key sits in your desk drawer at the district office. The business exists only on paper, no employees, no equipment, no operational history. The incorporation documents list consulting services as primary function, which means nothing specific enough to be disproven. It seemed like protection because paper entities cannot testify about what they observed, or who paid them. The fabricated business entity exists only on paper, which seemed like protection at the time. Paper entities cannot testify. They also cannot claim they were somewhere else when the crime occurred, which turns out to be the kind of evidence investigators prefer. You continue north. The buildings here are newer, their brickwork still sharp-edged, not yet softened by decades of weather and coal smoke. The street carries traffic in both directions. Automobiles and delivery trucks and elevated trains overhead creating the layered noise that means Chicago is conducting business according to its own definitions. A streetcar passes. Through its windows you see passengers reading newspapers, their attention absorbed by headlines about municipal politics and baseball scores. None of them are calculating how incorporation dates correlate with first deposits, or whether business entities that conduct no business attract more investigative attention than entities that maintain minimal plausible activity. Lakeside Commercial Services has a bank account and incorporation papers and a postal box. It receives no mail because it conducts no actual business. The deposits appear monthly because the entity serves a single function, providing documentary explanation for income that cannot be officially explained. Treasury Inspector Samuel Garrett specializes in finding connections between entities that appear separate. He has terminated 47 agents by identifying patterns in bank deposits, incorporation dates, and addresses that link fabricated businesses to actual people. He will spend 6 days in Chicago, reviewing files that agents believed were protected because they existed in different locations under different names. The Thursday envelope weighs 4 ounces. The bank accounts hold $19,600. The incorporation papers for Lakeside Commercial Services connect your name to a business that exists only to transform unexplainable income into documented deposits. Saturday evening, Garrett arrives. Between this moment and his arrival, you need to determine whether connections visible to investigators can be severed, or whether the paperwork has already created evidence that termination hearings require. The wind shifts, carries smoke from the stockyards, faint but present. The same wind that moved through the district office this morning now carries different information across different parts of the city. You turn west toward the elevated train station. Garrett's audit files contain sealed documentation from the Chicago field office. Those files were compiled over 6 months by investigators who understood that corruption creates patterns, even when participants believe they are operating without records. The day continues. 66 hours remain. District Supervisor Harold Meck stands at the front of the conference room with 12 file folders stacked on the table in front of him. The elevated train passes outside. The windows rattle in their frames. He waits for the sound to finish before speaking. Treasury Inspector Samuel Garrett arrives Thursday morning, Meck says. Routine operational audit, 6 months of enforcement records, arrest reports, confiscation documentation. The word routine sits in the room like a physical object. Everyone present understands what routine means when applied to an audit conducted by a Treasury inspector who specializes in corruption investigations. The silence that follows is not surprise, it is calculation. You sit 3 chairs from the window. Agent Riley sits across the table. Agent Morrison sits to your left. 9 other agents fill the remaining chairs. The district office operates with 12 agents total. All 12 are present. This is the first time in 6 months that a district meeting has achieved perfect attendance. Meck continues. All files should be complete and accurate. Inspector Garrett will review enforcement statistics, compare them to seizure records, and verify consistency across reporting periods. The elevated train passes again. The timing is exact. The word accurate arrives at the same moment as the rumble. Several agents smile without meaning to. The sound provides brief cover for the expressions that cross their faces. Agent Riley shifts in his chair. Is the audit connected to any specific complaint or irregularity, he says. No, Meck says. The answer is delivered without hesitation. Meck's hands remain flat on the table. His expression does not change. The meeting continues as though Riley has asked about weather patterns, rather than the question that determines whether 12 federal agents will retain their employment beyond Thursday evening. You watch Meck's face. He is 51 years old. He has worked in federal law enforcement since 1911. He was transferred to Chicago in 1924, when the previous district supervisor was terminated for accepting direct payment from a brewery operator who maintained production facilities in 3 locations and distributed through channels that were documented in ledgers the supervisor had examined personally before accepting payment. Meck learned from that case what can be documented and what cannot. Access to files begins Thursday at 8, Meck says. Inspector Garrett will conduct interviews as needed. Maintain standard operational tempo through the week. Standard operational tempo means continue enforcement activity as though nothing has changed. Make arrests. File reports. Document seizures. The operational tempo of the district has been standard for 14 months. The question is whether standard operational tempo produces documentation that survives comparison to other documentation that exists in sealed audit files traveling from Washington. The meeting ends at 5:30. Agents stand, chairs scrape against floorboards, the elevated train passes a third time, you remain seated, watch the room empty. Mech gathers his file folders, stacks them precisely, 12 folders, one per agent. Your folder is third from the top, blue cover, standard bureau issue. Contains weekly reports for 6 months. 24 reports total. Each report documents arrests made, liquor seized, establishments raided. Each report is accurate, in the sense that it describes events that occurred. Each report is incomplete in the sense that it describes only events that can be officially acknowledged. Mech places the stack under his arm, walks to the door, stops, turns. 60 hours, he says. Then he leaves. You sit in the empty conference room. The October light comes through the windows at an angle that will not return until next October. Dust moves in the air where men stood moments ago. The elevated train does not pass. The silence is complete. 60 hours from this moment to Thursday morning, when Inspector Garrett walks into the federal building with sealed files containing information that will either match the reports in Mech's folders or contradict them in ways that cannot be explained through standard operational abstractions. You stand, walk to the window, look down at North Clark Street 3 stories below. The Thursday traffic moves south, men in hats, women carrying parcels. The visibility of daily business conducted in a city where 30,000 establishments operate without legal authorization and enforcement exists as a negotiation rather than a prohibition. The reflection in the window shows the empty conference room behind you, 12 chairs, 1 table. The space where Mech stood with folders that contain your professional documentation for 6 months. You leave the room, walk down the corridor. 48 hours ago the telegram arrived. 36 hours ago you met with Frank DeLuca. 60 hours remain before the audit begins. The arithmetic is clear. The documentation exists. The question is whether the documentation can survive examination by a man who has terminated 47 agents in 18 months across 6 districts, and who understands that corruption creates records even when participants believe the records are separate and protected. Your desk waits in the district office. Reports need review before morning. You return to your desk. The district office is empty, except for Agent Morrison at the far end of the room, and the clerk who files arrest reports in the cabinet by the south wall. The overhead lights create shadows that did not exist when 12 agents filled the space. You open the lower desk drawer, remove the weekly reports, 6 months. 24 reports bound with twine in groups of 4. The paper is standard bureau issue. The ink is standard bureau issue. The content documents what happened in language designed to survive official scrutiny. Spread them across the desk. Arrange by month. October 1925 through March 1926. Each month represents 4 weeks of enforcement activity. Each week represents choices made about which establishments to raid, which shipments to intercept, which violations to document. October shows 3 arrests. November shows 4. December shows 2. January shows 5. The pattern is consistent with the district average. Not high enough to suggest exceptional performance. Not low enough to suggest insufficient enforcement. The middle range where attention is never focused. But the seizure numbers create a different pattern. October, $600 in confiscated liquor. November, $800. December, $400. January, $900. The monthly variation suggests operational inconsistency, raids that produce different results based on timing, location, or the specific establishments targeted. Treasury Inspector Samuel Garrett will see these numbers, will compare them to other numbers, wholesale costs, retail prices, transportation expenses, storage capacity, the mathematical relationships between volume of liquor seized and market value of liquor sold. Garrett spent 17 years in federal service developing the methodical precision required to identify patterns that diverge from reported enforcement activity. You pull a blank report form from the desk drawer, standard bureau documentation, fill it out in real time. This week's activity: 2 arrests on Tuesday, 1 arrest on Thursday, seizure value $300. The numbers match operational reality. They do not match the actual financial flow that moves through this district every week. Agent Morrison stands, crosses to your desk, stops 3 feet away. Thursday, he says. You look up. Morrison is 34 years old, has worked in Chicago for 2 years. Transferred from Detroit, where the previous district office was closed, after an audit revealed that enforcement activity had been coordinated with distribution networks, rather than operating against them. Morrison survived that audit. He learned what survives and what does not. Thursday, you confirm. Morrison nods once, returns to his desk. The conversation is complete. Everything that needs to be understood has been understood, without requiring additional language. The clerk closes the filing cabinet, locks it, leaves through the main door. The sound of his footsteps fades in the corridor. You are alone with Morrison in a room designed for 12 agents. Review the reports again, October through March. 6 months of documentation that describes enforcement activity in language that creates the appearance of systematic prohibition operations. The appearance is accurate. The operations occurred. The documentation records them. What the documentation does not record is the operational coordination that ensured specific establishments were not raided, specific shipments were not intercepted, specific violations were not observed. District Supervisor Harold Meck signs the weekly reports with the focused attention of a man who has learned to read only what is written there. The Bureau has never questioned why he developed this particular reading comprehension strategy. Stack the reports, bind them with twine, return them to the desk drawer. The reports exist. They cannot be destroyed without creating evidence of destruction. They cannot be modified without creating evidence of modification. They can only exist as they are, and wait for comparison to other documentation that tracks the same 6 months from different positions. The overhead light hums. The sound is constant, has been constant since you arrived in Chicago in March 1925. Background noise that stops being noticed until you sit alone in an empty office counting hours until an audit begins. Morrison leaves, does not say goodbye. The door closes. You sit at your desk in a room designed for 12 agents and occupied by none. The Thursday envelope sits in your jacket pocket. $1,400. Has sat there since yesterday evening when you collected it from Frank DeLuca's establishment. Has not yet been distributed to the 3 bank accounts that document its arrival as legitimate income from sources that exist only on paper. Your wife signed documents for one of those accounts using her maiden name without understanding what the deposits represented. 58 hours remain. You walk to the evidence storage room at 6:30. The federal building is nearly empty. Footsteps echo in the marble corridor. The elevator operator has left for the day. You take the stairs. Descend to the basement where confiscated liquor is stored in a space designed for evidence that never returns to circulation. The storage clerk sits behind a wooden desk reading the evening newspaper. Does not look up when you enter. You sign the access log. Your signature appears 14 times on the current page. The pattern is established. Weekly access. Sometimes twice weekly. The clerk has never questioned it. 3rd row. The clerk says without lifting his eyes from the newspaper. You walk past rows of wooden shelving that hold confiscated evidence from operations conducted across 6 months. Bottles, crates, barrels. Documentation tags attached to each item, showing the date of seizure, the agent responsible, the establishment of origin. Stop at the 3rd row. The section assigned to your cases. The documentation tags show $8,600 in seized liquor, 24 operations, October through March. The numbers match the weekly reports filed in your desk drawer upstairs. Each seizure is documented. Each value is calculated at market rate. Each item is tagged with information that creates an official record of enforcement activity. But the actual confiscations total approximately $30,000. You remove a documentation tag from a crate seized in January. Read the establishment name. Compare it to memory. The establishment is Frank DeLuca's primary distribution point on North Clark Street. The raid occurred on a Thursday evening. The seizure value listed on the tag is $400. The actual seizure value was $1,900. The difference represents liquor that was confiscated and then released through channels that are not documented because documentation would create evidence of the arrangement. You replace the tag, move to the next item. A barrel seized in February. Documentation shows $300. Actual seizure was $1,100. The pattern repeats across the entire section. Official records that document one reality. Physical evidence that supports another. Treasury Inspector Samuel Garrett will review these records. Will compare documentation tags to arrest reports. Will verify that seizure values match enforcement statistics. The numbers will match. The system was designed to produce matching numbers. What Garrett will also review are bank deposits made by agents in this district during the same 6-month period. Garrett's sealed audit files track cash movements and financial records that agents believed were separate and protected. The deposits will not match the documented seizure values. The deposits will match the undocumented seizure values. You walk back to the clerk's desk. He is still reading the newspaper. Cigar smoke rises from an ashtray beside the access log. You leave without signing out. The access log only requires entry signatures. Departure is not tracked. Climb the stairs. Return to the 1st floor. The federal building is dark except for the corridor lights that remain on through the night. Your footsteps echo against marble that was installed when the building opened in 1905 and will remain after everyone who works here is gone. Exit through the main doors. Walk east on Adams Street. The October evening is cold. Wind moves between buildings with the steady force that builds before winter. Men in overcoats hurry past. The evening traffic thins as offices close, and the city transitions from business to whatever business continues after business hours end. The elevated train rumbles overhead. You do not board it. Continue walking. Need the movement. Need the cold. Need the physical distance between the federal building and the apartment where your wife waits with questions you cannot answer using language that would not implicate her in arrangements she did not agree to participate in. 56 hours until Thursday morning. The confiscation records exist in the basement of the federal building. The bank deposits exist in 3 separate accounts. The connection between them exists in the operational coordination that was never documented, because documentation would make the coordination visible to audits designed to find exactly this pattern. Inspector Garrett has spent 18 months conducting exactly these audits across 6 districts. The 11 other agents in the district office whose deposit patterns match yours have 56 hours remaining to prepare answers that will not survive the questions. You stop at the corner of Adams and State. Look back at the federal building. The windows are dark on the upper floors. One light remains visible in the basement. The storage clerk finishing his newspaper before locking the evidence room and leaving through the service entrance. Turn south. Walk toward the apartment. The cold increases. Your breath shows in the air. Somewhere in Washington, Treasury Inspector Samuel Garrett is preparing files for travel to Chicago. The files contain information that will survive exactly as long as the distance between documentation and reality remains invisible. That distance is now measured in hours rather than assumptions. The storage room behind the kitchen smells like flour and metal. DeLuca stands beside the preparation table, where the Thursday envelope has been prepared every week for 14 months. Tonight the table is empty. 2 men from Treasury visited this afternoon, asking questions about federal agents who provide advance raid notice, DeLuca said. The jazz piano continues through the floor gratings, customers downstairs drinking bootleg whiskey that costs $3 per glass. The establishment has operated without federal interference since December 1925, because the interference was purchased in advance. Treasury Inspector Garrett arrives Thursday to audit district operations, you said. DeLuca nods once. His hands rest on the preparation table surface. The kitchen sounds continue through the closed door. Dishes, running water, voices calling orders. Normal business operations that depend on the arrangement continuing without documentation that connects payments to federal agents. Frank DeLuca operates his speakeasy with the quiet confidence of a man whose business model has been validated by 14 months of consistent results. The validation came from you. In writing. On a regular schedule. The questions were specific, DeLuca said. Dates, amounts, names of agents who might receive regular payments. 48 hours remain before Garrett arrives at the district office, with sealed audit files. The Thursday envelope represents $1,400 monthly. $16,800 total across 14 months. The deposits were distributed to 3 separate Chicago banks under 3 different names to create separation between income source and income documentation. The separation no longer exists if Treasury already knows which establishments make payments and which agents receive them. What did you tell them, you said? That the establishment operates legally within Chicago municipal guidelines, that we maintain appropriate licenses for food service operations. The answer avoids what was actually asked. DeLuca understands institutional vocabulary of careful omission, because he has practiced it for 14 months in conversations where both parties understand what is being discussed, without stating it directly. The jazz piano shifts to a faster tempo, Thursday night crowd arriving through the front entrance that looks like a legitimate restaurant. The service entrance remains separate for deliveries and for federal agents who use it every Thursday evening to collect payment for services rendered. Somewhere above this room, Garrett's men are likely walking back toward the district office with notes about this conversation. The timeline is compressing. What seemed like 48 hours of preparation time is actually 24 hours, minus however long it takes Treasury to correlate visit records with agent schedules. The ledger, you said. DeLuca's expression does not change. In the safe upstairs, dates and amounts recorded in my accounting hand. Professional operations require professional documentation. The confirmation lands with the weight of something you hoped was not true but always knew was. The storage room air carries the smell of cigarette smoke from the kitchen, where the cook works the dinner service. DeLuca moves to the preparation table and places both hands on the metal surface. You want me to destroy the ledger? DeLuca said. The question is direct. Destroying records eliminates documentation but creates different evidence. Gaps where continuous records should exist. Patterns of omission that suggest deliberate concealment. Treasury Inspector Samuel Garrett specializes in finding what people believe they have hidden. That would be your decision to make as the establishment owner, you said. The kitchen noise continues through the closed door. Plates stacking, water running. Normal operations that occur regardless of federal audits or Treasury investigations. The speakeasy has been profitable because it operates with the same consistency as legitimate businesses. Regular hours, regular payments, regular documentation. The ledger also documents payments to 3 other agents in the district office, 2 police officers from Chicago Department, DeLuca said. 47 hours remain. The 11 other agents in the district office whose deposit patterns match yours are documented in the same ledger that sits in DeLuca's safe upstairs. Each entry represents a Thursday evening where an envelope was prepared and collected, and deposited to a bank account that exists under a name designed to create separation between source and recipient. The separation was protective when the system operated without external scrutiny. The separation becomes evidence when Treasury arrives with audit files that track cash movements across multiple accounts. The police officers also receive regular payments, you said. Different amounts, different schedules, same documentation method. DeLuca's voice maintains consistent length regardless of stakes. He treats corruption as business negotiation, precise financial terms. No moral framing. The ledger documents a system that involves 12 federal agents, 2 police officers, and 1 speakeasy operator, who kept records because professional operations require professional documentation. The jazz piano downstairs continues at the faster tempo. Thursday night crowd spending money on illegal liquor in an establishment that operates openly because the people responsible for closing it are the people who receive payment to keep it open. Garrett terminated 47 agents in 18 months, you said. I'm aware of Inspector Garrett's record. The statement contains no question. DeLuca knows what Treasury investigations produce. Terminated agents, closed establishments, prosecution of operators who maintain documentation that connects illegal operations to federal protection. The ledger in the safe upstairs represents evidence that cannot be explained as anything other than what it is. District Supervisor Harold Meck signed off on every raid report you filed for 14 months. His signature appears on documents that show zero enforcement activity against this establishment, despite it operating 3 blocks from the district office. If the ledger remains intact, it documents the entire system, you said. Yes. If the ledger is destroyed, the gap becomes its own evidence. Also yes. The kitchen sounds continue, metal on metal, running water, voices calling orders in Italian and English. Normal business operations that will continue or cease, depending on decisions made in the next 47 hours. The Clark and Lake Station platform carries the mechanical sound of arriving trains. 9:15. The Thursday evening crowd boards the elevated cars heading south and west to neighborhoods where federal agents and speakeasy operators and police officers live in houses purchased with income that cannot be explained through documented salaries. The wooden seat transmits vibration through your spine, the same rhythm as every evening for 18 months. October darkness beyond the windows. City lights passing in regular intervals as the train moves south through the district, where 30,000 speakeasies operate with the visibility of legitimate establishments. The fabricated business entity seemed like protective separation at the time. The arithmetic is clear now. Creating a paper trail more suspicious than direct deposits would have been demonstrates understanding of investigative methodology in exactly the way you did not intend. Lakeside Commercial Services has incorporation papers filed with Cook County in November 1925. Business purpose listed as consulting services. No office address beyond a postal box. No employees beyond 1 officer whose name matches your brother's name but whose signature on bank documents does not match your brother's signature. The entity exists only to explain deposits that cannot be explained any other way. Treasury Inspector Garrett will compare incorporation papers to bank records to signature samples, and discover that the protective separation was constructed by someone who understood that documentation creates evidence, but did not understand that evidence creates patterns that investigators follow, to conclusions that defendants cannot explain. The elevated train turns west at Roosevelt Road, The mechanical vibration continues through the wooden seat into your spine. Familiar route. Practice journey. 18 months of Thursday evenings boarding this train with an envelope that weighs 4 ounces and contains $1,400 bills distributed across 3 separate accounts before reaching home. Tonight the envelope does not exist. DeLuca did not prepare it because 2 men from Treasury visited asking questions about federal agents who provide advance raid notice. The questions were specific: dates, amounts, names. 46 hours remain before Garrett arrives at the district office with sealed audit files. The Thursday envelope is documented in DeLuca's ledger. The deposits are documented in bank records under 3 different names. The fabricated business entity is documented in incorporation papers that create more questions than the deposits would have created alone. The train slows approaching Kedzie Avenue, platform lights illuminating passengers waiting to board. Federal agents and factory workers and shopkeepers boarding the same elevated cars, because income differences are not visible in October darkness, where everyone appears identical in overcoats and hats. Your wife signed bank documents using her maiden name without understanding what the deposits represented. The account shows regular monthly deposits of $400, beginning December 1925. No corresponding employment. No business income. No inheritance or gift documentation. Just deposits that occur with the same regularity as the Thursday envelope collection schedule. The pattern will be obvious to someone looking for patterns. Treasury investigations find documentation even when participants believe they operated without records. The ledger exists. The bank accounts exist. The fabricated business entity exists. The Thursday envelope collection schedule matches the deposit schedule, matches the documentation schedule that seemed like protective separation, but was actually incremental construction of evidence that cannot be explained as anything other than what it is. How was the day? Your wife said. Routine, you said. She sets the dinner plate on the table. Steam rises from the potatoes. The kitchen window is open, and October air moves through the room with the temperature of something that will require the furnace by next week. The envelope came Thursday, she said. You sit at the table. The chair makes the sound it has made for 2 years. The wood floor carries the weight distribution you recognize without looking. It did, you said. She pours coffee into the cup. The liquid reaches the line you prefer without measurement. Marriage creates expertise in details that require no discussion. Same amount as last month, she said. Yes. The coffee is hot. You drink it in the interval that exists between swallowing and speech. She sits across from you with her own cup, and does not ask the question that stopped requiring an answer in December 1925, when the deposits became large enough that asking would make her complicit in knowing. The kitchen clock reads 10:15. 38 hours remain until Treasury Inspector Samuel Garrett arrives at the district office with sealed audit files tracking cash movements that do not match the arrests reported in your district. Garrett terminated 47 agents in 18 months across 6 districts. The Thursday envelope is $1,400 monthly. 14 months of deposits total $19,600, distributed across 3 bank accounts. Your wife signed documents for one of those accounts using her maiden name. She signed them because you asked her to sign them. She did not ask why. You calculate the timeline while the coffee cools. If Garrett terminates you by Friday evening, the bank accounts will be frozen by the following Tuesday. 3 business days. You could withdraw the funds Monday morning, transfer them to a location that requires no documentation. But withdrawal creates its own trail, and Garrett will have already reviewed the deposit history by the time you reach the bank. The arithmetic is inflexible. You have $19,600 in 3 accounts. Garrett has sealed audit files. The files will show the deposits. The deposits will match the Thursday envelope schedule. The schedule will match the advance raid notice you have provided to Frank DeLuca for 14 months. Your wife drinks her coffee. The clock moves past 10:20. She does not ask about the envelope because she stopped asking about the envelope. But the account under her maiden name makes her part of the system now. Not legally complicit, but documented. Her signature appears on bank paperwork that will be reviewed by a Treasury inspector whose career advancement depends on high-profile terminations. Long day, she said. They're all long, you said. You finish the coffee. The plate in front of you holds food that requires eating. You eat it with the attention of someone performing a necessary task. The potatoes are seasoned correctly. The meat is prepared the way you prefer. 2 years of marriage. She has learned what you notice and what you ignore. The envelope sits in your jacket pocket in the front closet. 4 ounces distributed in $20 bills. Collected Thursday afternoon from Frank DeLuca's establishment on North Clark Street. Not yet deposited into the 3 accounts. Still physically present. Still something you could burn or bury or throw into the Chicago River. But burning it changes nothing. The deposits from the previous 13 months already exist. The bank documents already show the pattern. Treasury already has the audit files. The envelope in your pocket represents October. The audit covers April through September. Destroying October's envelope solves nothing. You stand and carry the plate to the sink. Your wife remains at the table with her coffee. The window is still open and the October air still moves through the kitchen. Tired? She said. Some, you said. She nods once. You leave the kitchen and climb the stairs to the bedroom. The house makes the sounds houses make at night. Settling wood. Cooling pipes. The elevated train passes 6 blocks south with the rumble that marks the hour. You sit on the edge of the bed and remove your shoes. The jacket hangs on the bedpost. The envelope remains in the pocket. $1,400. 3 weeks of income if the bank accounts are frozen. 3 weeks to find new employment that does not require explaining why a federal agent was terminated during a corruption investigation. The lamp on the nightstand casts the light that bedrooms hold at night. Your wife moves upstairs with the footsteps you recognize. She enters the room and begins the routine that ends every evening. Remove the day clothes. Prepare for sleep. The pattern has not changed in 2 years. 38 hours until Garrett arrives. 72 hours until the audit concludes. The deposits cannot be undone. The ledger in DeLuca's safe cannot be unwritten. District Supervisor Harold Meck will be in that office when Garrett opens the sealed files. The 11 other agents in the district office whose deposit patterns match yours will be there too. The only variable is what you do between this moment and Friday evening. You lie down. The ceiling above the bed holds the familiar cracks that plaster develops over time. Your wife lies beside you. The lamp goes dark. Routine day tomorrow, she said. Should be, you said. The darkness settles. Outside, Chicago continues operating at the scale of 30,000 speakeasies and the federal agents who protect them. Inside, you calculate the distance between this moment and Tuesday morning when the banks open and the accounts can still be accessed before they are frozen. 3 weeks. Maybe 4 if you withdraw carefully. Enough time to find something. Enough time to leave Chicago. Enough time to make decisions that become irreversible the moment you make them. The elevated train carries you south through the district at 7:45 Wednesday morning. The same route. The same stations. The rumble through the floor of the car matches the rumble from every previous morning for 18 months. You arrive at the district office at 8 o'clock. Agent Thomas Riley sits at his desk reviewing files. Agent Morrison works at the south window. The clerk files documents in the cabinet near the door. Everyone present is pretending to conduct routine work, while calculating how much evidence exists, and whether Treasury Inspector Garrett already has it. District Supervisor Harold Meck stands at the front of the room with the weekly raid schedule. He distributes the assignments with the focused attention of a man maintaining appearances. The schedule lists 3 establishments for Thursday. Thursday is the day Garrett arrives. Should the Thursday raids be postponed until after Garrett completes his audit? Riley said. No, Mech said. Mech places the schedule on your desk. The paper lists the 3 establishments, one on West Division Street, one on South Halsted, one on North Clark. The North Clark establishment is Frank DeLuca's operation. The establishment, where you collected the Thursday envelope 6 days ago. Standard confiscation protocol, Mech said. Document everything. You read the schedule. The North Clark raid is scheduled for 2 o'clock Thursday afternoon. 4 hours before Garrett's arrival at 6 o'clock. The timing is not accidental. Mech is creating documentation that shows continued enforcement activity. Raids conducted. Evidence confiscated. Reports filed. The appearance of agents performing their duties. But DeLuca's establishment contains the ledger documenting 14 months of Thursday envelope payments. If you raid the establishment, and DeLuca becomes uncertain about your ability to protect him, he might cooperate with Garrett's investigation. If you do not raid the establishment, the schedule shows a gap in enforcement that Garrett will notice. You sit at your desk and review the case files. Agent Webb works at the desk beside yours. He has been in the district office for 6 weeks. He takes notes with the careful attention of someone documenting what he observes. The notes remain in his desk drawer. You have not seen them, you do not know what they contain. The office operates at standard tempo. Phones ring. Files move between desks. The elevated train rumbles past the windows every 12 minutes. Nothing visible has changed, but everyone present understands that Treasury is coming, and that the investigation will conclude with terminations. 32 hours remain until Garrett arrives. The Thursday envelope system has operated without incident for 14 months. The system depends on advance notice. You provide the notice. DeLuca pays $1,400 monthly. The money enters 3 bank accounts. The accounts show steady deposits that do not match your official salary. The calculation is simple. Garrett will compare the reported arrests to the actual cash movements. The arrests will not match the deposits. The deposits will not match the confiscations. The confiscations will not match the evidence releases. Every number will diverge from every other number because the system was designed to produce that divergence. DeLuca keeps his ledger in a safe because he is a professional and professionals document their business arrangements. That this arrangement is with a federal agent investigating him has apparently not struck him as a contradiction worth worrying about until now. You stand and walk to the file cabinet. The confiscation records from the past 6 months fill 2 drawers. Each record shows the date, the establishment, the amount confiscated, and the agent responsible. Your name appears on 40% of the records. 40% of the district's enforcement activity traced to one agent. That percentage will register as an anomaly when Garrett reviews the files. Agent Webb approaches the cabinet. He pulls a file from the upper drawer and returns to his desk. His movement is efficient. No wasted motion, no visible tension. He has been watching you for 6 weeks. He has not asked questions. He has not filed reports that you know about. But silence is its own form of documentation. Mech returns to his office and closes the door. Through the window you can see him at his desk with the telephone. He speaks for 4 minutes, hangs up, sits without moving. He has been district supervisor for 3 years. He signed every report that went to Washington. Every report that showed arrests matching the official statistics, while the actual cash movements followed a different pattern entirely. The morning proceeds. Files reviewed. Phones answered. The work continues because stopping the work creates its own signal. You maintain the appearance of routine enforcement while calculating which records can be explained and which cannot. At 11:30 you leave the office and walk north on Clark Street. The October air carries the temperature of something between seasons. The sidewalk holds the foot traffic of a Wednesday in a city that operates at the scale of 30,000 establishments, serving liquor that has been illegal for 6 years. You reach DeLuca's establishment at noon. The front operates as a tobacco shop. The back operates as the actual business. You enter through the front door. The clerk at the counter nods once. You walk through the storage room to the office where DeLuca conducts his business. He sits at his desk reviewing paperwork. The ledger is not visible, but you know it exists. You know what it contains. You know that if Garrett finds it during the audit, the entries will match your bank deposits exactly. Raid scheduled tomorrow, you said. 2 o'clock. DeLuca looks up from the paperwork. His expression does not change. Same protocol as always, he said. Yes. Evidence removed and returned the following week? That depends on what happens Thursday evening. He sets down the pen. The office is quiet except for the muted sound of the tobacco shop operations beyond the door. Treasury arrives Thursday, DeLuca said. 6 o'clock. And the raid is at 2. Yes. He leans back in his chair. The leather makes the sound leather makes underweight. For 14 months, this arrangement has operated without complication. You provide advance notice. He pays $1,400. The raids occur on schedule. The evidence is confiscated and quietly released. The system functions because both parties understand their roles. But Treasury changes the arithmetic. If Garrett reviews the ledger and matches the payments to your deposits, the arrangement becomes evidence of corruption. If DeLuca cooperates with the investigation, he avoids prosecution. If he does not cooperate, he shares your liability. The ledger stays where it is, you said. And if Treasury asks about it, you document legitimate business expenses. The entries show payments to various parties for various services. None of them named. DeLuca nods slowly. The calculation is visible in the pause. He is determining whether protecting you serves his interests, or whether cooperation with Treasury serves them better. Thursday at 2, he said. You leave the office, walk back through the storage room, exit through the tobacco shop. The street outside carries the midday traffic of a city that does not acknowledge the federal law it is systematically violating. 26 hours remain until Garrett arrives. The raid schedule is set. The ledger remains in DeLuca's safe. The deposits remain in 3 bank accounts. The fabricated business entity that exists only to explain income that cannot be explained sits in your own files at home. Your wife, who signed bank documents using her maiden name without understanding what the deposits represented, will be named in Garrett's audit. The system that has operated for 14 months now depends on decisions that will be made between Thursday at 2 and Thursday at 6. The Wednesday afternoon raid on the establishment on West Division Street proceeds with theatrical efficiency. You arrive at 1:30 with Agent Riley and Agent Webb. The establishment operates as a restaurant. The back room operates as the actual business. You enter through the front door. The owner stands behind the counter with the expression of someone who has been raided before and knows the procedure. You show the warrant. He nods. You walk through the dining room to the storage area where $800 in bootleg whiskey sits in crates marked as olive oil. Riley photographs the evidence. Webb takes notes. You direct the confiscation. The liquor is loaded into the department vehicle. The owner watches without protest. This is the 6th raid on this establishment in 14 months. The liquor will be logged as evidence. The evidence will be stored in the basement of the district office. Next week, the liquor will be quietly released back to the owner for $400. But today you do not mention release arrangements. Treasury Inspector Garrett arrives tomorrow, and every conversation now is potentially evidence. The owner understands this without being told. He signs the confiscation receipt. You leave the establishment with $800 in documented evidence that will appear in the files Garrett reviews. The vehicle carries you back to the district office. Riley drives. Webb sits in the rear with the evidence crates. The elevated train passes overhead as you turn onto Clark Street. The rumble through the vehicle roof matches the rumble that marks every hour in this district. You arrive at the office at 3:15. The liquor is carried to the basement storage. The confiscation form is filed. The photograph is attached to the case record. Everything documented. Everything procedurally correct. The appearance of federal agents conducting enforcement operations. Meck reviews the paperwork at his desk. He reads it with the attention of someone checking that every required field contains an entry. He signs the form, returns it to you, says nothing. The signature is enough. The operation was conducted according to protocol. The documentation is complete. You return to your desk. Webb sits at his desk, reviewing his notes from the raid. The notes are extensive. He writes with the careful precision of someone who believes records should be accurate. His handwriting is neat. His observations are detailed. You do not know whether the notes will ever be read by someone other than Webb. The office operates at the tempo of late afternoon. Phones ring less frequently. Files are returned to cabinets. Agents prepare to end the workday. Through the window, the October light angles lower. The day is concluding. Tomorrow is Thursday. Garrett arrives at 6 o'clock. You stand and walk to the basement storage. The confiscated liquor sits in the section reserved for evidence awaiting disposition. $800 from today's raid, $42,000 from the previous 6 months. Liquor that was confiscated and will be released. Released and paid for and not reported. The basement is cold. The light comes from 2 bulbs hanging from the ceiling. The floor is concrete. The walls are brick. This is where evidence comes when it is removed from circulation. This is where evidence goes when it needs to disappear. You return upstairs. The office is quieter now. Riley has left. Morrison is filing his final report. Webb remains at his desk. Meck is in his office with the door closed. The elevated train rumbles past. 3:45. You sit at your desk and review the confiscation records from the past 6 months. $42,000 confiscated. $8,000 reported as disposed. $34,000 released back to the establishments for approximately $17,000 in payments. The $17,000 was divided among 12 agents. Your share was $6,800, plus the Thursday envelopes, plus the deposits under your wife's maiden name. The records show the system. The system shows the corruption. The corruption shows in every file Garrett will review. 17 years in federal service specializing in corruption investigations within the Bureau of Prohibition. The deposits cannot be explained. The only question is whether DeLuca's ledger will be found, and whether his cooperation can be secured before Garrett matches the payments to your accounts. Webb closes his notebook, stands, puts on his coat, walks to the door. He does not say good night. He leaves the office with the same efficiency he entered it this morning. The door closes behind him. You remain at your desk. Through the window, the October light continues fading. The street below carries the traffic of people leaving work. The elevated train marks 4 o'clock with its passage. 26 hours remain until Garrett arrives at the district office with sealed audit files. The confiscation today was documented correctly. The raid tomorrow will be documented correctly. Everything will appear procedurally sound. But procedure cannot explain why the deposits do not match the arrests. Procedure cannot explain why the confiscations do not match the evidence logs. Procedure cannot explain the Thursday envelopes. You stand, put on your coat, leave the office, walk to the elevated train station. The platform holds the crowd that forms every evening at this hour. Men leaving the district. Women finishing shopping. The routine movement of a city that operates according to patterns that repeat daily. The train arrives, you board, the doors close. The train moves south through the district. Through the windows you can see the establishments that pay for protection. The establishments that will be raided tomorrow. The establishments that will continue operating because the system allows them to continue operating. A woman 2 seats ahead opens a newspaper. The headline reads, "Treasury expands Prohibition audit." Garrett's name does not appear, but the article describes federal inspectors arriving in 6 major cities this week to review enforcement records and bank deposits that diverge from reported arrests. Tomorrow, the raid on DeLuca's establishment will document continued enforcement. Tomorrow, Garrett will arrive with audit files that document continued corruption. The 2 events will occur 4 hours apart. The gap between them represents the space where decisions must be made. Decisions about cooperation. Decisions about evidence. Decisions about whether the Thursday envelope system can survive Treasury's investigation. The train carries you toward home. The rumble through the floor is constant. The October air through the open windows is cold. 6 blocks from your house you stand and move toward the door. The train slows. Stops. You exit onto the platform. The walk home takes 8 minutes. Your wife will ask how the day was. You will tell her it was routine. She will not ask about the envelope. You will not mention that tomorrow determines whether the bank accounts remain accessible, or whether Tuesday morning becomes the last opportunity to withdraw funds that are already documented as evidence of systematic corruption spanning 14 months. 26 hours. The raid at 2, Garrett at 6. Everything documented, everything irreversible. The files are arranged on your desk in the order Garrett will request them tomorrow. Enforcement reports. Confiscation records. Weekly summaries. Each folder represents a decision about what to document and what to omit. Those decisions seemed reasonable at the time. The district office is empty. The other agents left at 5 o'clock. Morrison's desk is clear. Webb's typewriter is covered. The clerk locked the filing cabinets before departing. You open the first enforcement file. September raids. 12 establishments cited. 8 closures recorded. 4 establishments currently operating with different names at the same addresses. The reports do not mention the name changes because the reports were filed before the name changes occurred. The dates align correctly. The numbers match the citations. The gap between what was reported and what happened exists in the space between September and October. The confiscation records show identical patterns. Liquor seized. Liquor disposed. The disposal documentation references the incinerator behind the federal building. The incinerator that processes confiscated alcohol at a rate that would require continuous operation 16 hours daily to match the recorded disposal volumes. Nobody has questioned the mathematics because questioning the mathematics means acknowledging that the calculations are impossible. The bank statements sit in the bottom drawer of your desk. 3 accounts, 3 separate institutions: First National, Continental Trust, Lakeside Commercial Bank. The deposits occur on the same day each month. Thursday. The amounts vary slightly month to month, but maintain consistent patterns. $1,400 divided across 3 accounts in proportions that seemed strategic when you established them. Your wife signed documents at First National using her maiden name. She asked why you wanted the account structured that way. You explained it was for privacy. She accepted that explanation because you are a federal agent, and federal agents require privacy for professional reasons. The explanation was not false, it was incomplete. Your brother's name appears on the Continental Trust account because he agreed to be listed as a business partner in Lakeside Commercial Services. He asked what kind of services the business provided. You said consulting services for Chicago businesses. He asked what kind of consulting. You said compliance consulting. He stopped asking questions, because he understood that compliance consulting means things that should not be explained in detail. The fabricated business entity exists on incorporation papers filed with Cook County in March 1925. Lakeside Commercial Services. Business address: Post Office Box 847. The entity has no employees, no office space, no clients, no operations. It has bank deposits that occur monthly, with the regularity of legitimate business income. The bank deposits were made under your wife's maiden name, your brother's name, and a fabricated business entity, which seemed like diversification at the time. Treasury investigators call this pattern recognition. You close the files. The decisions documented in these folders cannot be undocumented. The deposits cannot be undeposited. The accounts cannot be unopened. The 14 months of Thursday envelopes cannot be uncollected. The district office clock reads 8:45. Garrett arrives tomorrow at 8 o'clock. 14 hours remain between this moment and the moment when the pattern you constructed becomes visible to someone whose career depends on recognizing patterns. Treasury Inspector Samuel Garrett, 43 years old, 17 years in federal service, 47 agents terminated in 18 months. The files from those 47 cases establish the methodology he will apply to yours. Compare cash movements to enforcement statistics, identify divergences, document the gaps where corruption creates records, even when participants believe they are operating without records. The elevated train rumbles past outside. October evening air moves through the window that remains open 6 inches at the bottom, the building cooling from the day's warmth into the night's cold. You remain at your desk. The files in front of you contain the evidence of decisions that seemed reasonable when you made them, and irreversible now that they are documented. Tomorrow morning Garrett will request these same files and compare them to records you did not know existed, and discover gaps you did not know were visible. The lamp on your desk casts shadows across the file folders. Each folder a question Garrett will ask. Each question an explanation you will provide. Each explanation a calculation about which truth can be acknowledged, and which truth must remain unspoken. 36 hours until Friday evening. 36 hours until the pattern recognition analysis becomes termination documentation, becomes the end of 18 months in Chicago, and the beginning of whatever comes after. Thursday morning arrives with the methodical inevitability of something scheduled weeks ago. 8 o'clock. The district office operates at standard tempo. Agents at desks. Typewriters producing enforcement reports. The clerk filing documentation in the cabinets by the south wall. Treasury Inspector Samuel Garrett enters through the main door at 8 o'clock, carrying 2 leather document cases. Mid-40s. Gray suit. Wire-rimmed glasses. The expression of a man who has made this entrance 47 times in 18 months, and understands exactly what he will find. District Supervisor Harold Meck greets him at the entrance. The handshake carries the careful formality of someone welcoming an executioner who made an appointment. They speak briefly. Meck gestures toward the conference room. Garrett nods once and proceeds directly to the conference room, without acknowledging the agents at their desks. The conference room door closes. Through the frosted glass you observe 2 silhouettes, Meck standing, Garrett seated. The conversation lasts 4 minutes. Meck exits. Garrett remains. 10 minutes pass. The district office maintains operational appearance. Morrison types a raid report. Webb reviews confiscation records. The clerk answers a telephone call and records a message in the logbook. The conference room door opens. Garrett stands in the doorway with a clipboard in his left hand. I require all enforcement files, confiscation records, and weekly reports for the past 6 months, he says. His voice carries the procedural efficiency of someone who has made this request 47 times and knows exactly what the files will reveal. Meck nods to the clerk. The clerk unlocks the filing cabinets and begins removing folders. The process takes 12 minutes. 3 stacks of folders. Enforcement. Confiscation. Weekly summaries. The clerk carries them to the conference room in 2 trips. Garrett accepts the files without comment. The conference room door closes again. The district office continues. Morrison completes his raid report. Webb files his confiscation records. You remain at your desk reviewing a citation from last week that requires follow-up documentation. The citation is legitimate. The follow-up documentation is accurate. The work continues, because the work continuing is what agents do while Treasury inspectors review files in conference rooms. 30 minutes pass. The conference room door remains closed. Through the frosted glass, Garrett's silhouette moves between the table and the filing position. Methodical. Unhurried. The movements of someone conducting analysis that produces conclusions. The telephone on Mech's desk rings. Mech answers. Brief conversation. He stands and walks to the conference room. Knocks twice. Enters. The conversation lasts 6 minutes. Mech exits and returns to his desk without speaking to anyone. You complete the follow-up documentation for the citation. The paperwork is filed, the desk is clear. Standard operational tempo maintained while the inspector in the conference room compares enforcement reports to confiscation records to weekly summaries, and identifies the gaps that exist between what was reported and what occurred. The 11 other agents in the district office maintain their routines. Each man at his desk represents the same calculation you made 18 months ago. Each man signed the same federal oath. Each man receives the same federal salary that does not cover rent and groceries, and the cost of maintaining a family in a city where prices rise faster than federal wages. Morrison's wife shops at the discount grocer on Halstead. Webb's children wear hand-me-downs from cousins in Milwaukee. Nobody discusses the Thursday envelopes, because discussing the Thursday envelopes means acknowledging that everybody receives Thursday envelopes. The elevated train rumbles past outside. October morning becoming October afternoon, the building warming from the night's cold into the day's heat. The district office maintaining the appearance of an organization conducting legitimate federal enforcement, while the actual enforcement patterns are being documented 30 feet away behind frosted glass. Garrett does not exit the conference room for lunch. At 1 o'clock the clerk brings him coffee. At 2:30 he requests additional files. Bank records. Deposit documentation. Financial statements from 3 Chicago banks. The request is delivered with the same procedural efficiency as the morning request. The work continues. The waiting continues. The calculation about which explanation can be provided and which truth must remain unspoken continues in the silence between the conference room door and your desk, where the Thursday envelope has not arrived this week, because Frank DeLuca understood that Thursday envelopes during Treasury inspections create documentation that nobody benefits from creating. The conference room door opens at 10 o'clock. Garrett stands in the doorway. His eyes move across the office and stop at your desk. "Agent," he says. "Conference room." You stand. Walk to the conference room. Enter. The door closes behind you. The conference room table is covered with files. Enforcement reports on the left. Confiscation records in the center. Bank statements on the right. 3 separate stacks of documentation that seemed separate when you created them, and connected now that they are arranged on the same table. Garrett sits. Gestures to the chair opposite. You sit. He opens a folder. Bank statements. First National, Continental Trust, Lakeside Commercial Bank. The deposit records, visible in 3 columns of typed numbers. Explain the bank deposits made to accounts under your wife's maiden name, your brother's name, and Lakeside Commercial Services, Garrett said. The question is delivered with the neutral tone of someone who already knows the explanation and is documenting your response for the record. The accounts represent legitimate savings from my federal salary. My wife's maiden name was used for privacy, you said. Garrett makes a notation in the margin of the bank statement. His pen moves with the precision of someone recording testimony that will be referenced later during termination proceedings. Why would legitimate salary savings be deposited in identical amounts on identical days across 3 separate accounts? Garrett said. The question contains its own answer. The question is not seeking information. The question is establishing that you understand the question is not actually a question. I prefer consistent financial planning, you said. Garrett makes another notation, sets down his pen, removes his glasses, cleans them with a handkerchief from his jacket pocket, replaces them. The entire sequence takes 40 seconds and creates 40 seconds of silence, where your explanation sits in the air between the table and the frosted glass door. Your federal salary is $150 monthly, Garrett says. The combined deposits across these 3 accounts total $1,400 monthly for 14 consecutive months. The arithmetic suggests income sources beyond federal salary. He does not ask you to explain the numbers. He states the numbers and waits for you to acknowledge that the numbers are correct. I maintain supplemental income from consulting work, you say. Through Lakeside Commercial Services. Yes. Which provides what type of consulting? Compliance consulting for Chicago businesses. Garrett opens another folder. Incorporation papers for Lakeside Commercial Services. He reads without expression. Lakeside Commercial Services was incorporated March 1925. Business address is a post office box. No office space listed. No employees listed beyond yourself and your brother. No clients documented in incorporation filing. No business licenses issued by the City of Chicago. Each statement lands with the weight of something that cannot be contradicted because it is documented fact. The business operates on a referral basis, you say. Client documentation is maintained separately for privacy reasons. I will require that documentation. It is not currently available. Define not currently available. The documentation is stored at a separate location. What location? My residence. I will visit your residence this afternoon to collect the documentation. The statement is not negotiable. The procedural efficiency that carried him through 47 previous corruption investigations in 18 months now carries him through the documentation collection phase of your corruption investigation. The documentation may require time to assemble, you say. I have 6 days allocated for this district audit. Time is not the constraint. Documentation is the constraint. If documentation exists, you will produce it. If documentation does not exist, that absence becomes documentation of a different kind. Garrett returns the incorporation papers to the folder, opens the enforcement files, September raids, October citations. The reports you filed that showed 12 establishments cited and 8 closures recorded. Your enforcement activity shows consistent patterns, he says. Regular citations, regular closures, regular confiscation volumes. The patterns are consistent with competent federal enforcement. They are also consistent with enforcement activity designed to appear competent, while maintaining operational arrangements, with the establishments being enforced. He does not ask if you maintain operational arrangements. He states that your enforcement patterns are consistent with operational arrangements, and waits for you to explain why the patterns should be interpreted differently. My enforcement record meets district standards, you say. District standards are part of this audit. Your enforcement record meeting district standards does not eliminate questions about what district standards represent. Through the frosted glass, the other agents maintain their operational rhythm. District Supervisor Harold Meck signs a requisition form. The clerk types an inter-office memo. Normal bureaucratic motion continuing, while the bureaucratic investigation dismantles the system that made that motion profitable. Garrett closes the enforcement file, stacks it with the bank statements and the incorporation papers. Three separate types of documentation that create one consistent pattern. You will produce client documentation for Lakeside Commercial Services by Friday morning, he says. You will provide written explanation for deposit patterns across 3 separate bank accounts. You will document all sources of supplemental income for the period March 1925 through October 1926. These materials will be submitted to my attention in this conference room no later than 8 o'clock Friday morning. He opens his document case, removes a form, places it on the table in front of you. Sign acknowledging receipt of documentation request. You sign. The pen moves across the signature line with the mechanical precision of someone signing a form that documents their own investigation. You return the pen. Garrett files the form in his document case. Return to your desk. Continue standard operations. I will notify you when additional questions require your presence. You stand, walk to the door, exit the conference room, return to your desk. The other agents do not look up. The work continues. The waiting continues. The calculation about which documentation can be produced and which absence of documentation will become evidence of systematic corruption continues in the 30 hours remaining before Friday morning at 8 o'clock. The conference room window frames the interview in silence. Frank DeLuca sits across from Treasury Inspector Samuel Garrett, with his attorney beside him, reviewing documents spread across the table in organized folders that Garrett has prepared, with the systematic attention of someone who does not ask questions without already possessing documented answers. You watch from your desk through the frosted glass that reveals silhouettes and posture but not words. The interview begins at 2 o'clock Thursday afternoon, and the methodical precision with which Garrett takes notes suggests questions following a prepared sequence rather than exploratory conversation. DeLuca gestures with the emphasis of someone providing detailed explanations. His attorney leans forward twice to review specific documents that Garrett slides across the table. The posture suggests cooperation rather than resistance. You understand without hearing the conversation that DeLuca has decided loyalty serves his interests less effectively than documented compliance with a federal corruption investigation. The elevated train passes at 14 minutes past 2. The mechanical rumble carries through the district office with the familiar consistency that has marked every afternoon for 18 months. Through the window, Garrett's pen moves across his notepad in the steady rhythm of someone recording information that confirms what audit files have already documented. DeLuca's hands remain visible above the table. His attorney takes notes. The interview continues without interruption. At 2:45, Garrett opens a second folder. DeLuca leans back in his chair and speaks for several minutes without looking at the documents. His attorney does not interrupt. Garrett writes 3 full pages during this portion of the interview. You cannot see his expression through the frosted glass, but you can see the pace at which he writes, and the pace suggests significance rather than routine clarification. The other agents in the district office continue standard afternoon operations. Agent Morrison files arrest reports at the cabinet by the south wall. The clerk processes confiscation documentation at the desk near the stairwell. The typewriter at the far end of the room maintains its irregular rhythm. No one watches the conference room window except you. No one needs to watch the conference room window except you. At 3:15, DeLuca's attorney requests a brief recess. Garrett nods once and stands. DeLuca and his attorney exit the conference room and walk to the stairwell that descends to the building's main entrance. Garrett remains at the table, organizing his notes into separate stacks that correspond to the folder system he established before the interview began. One stack is noticeably thicker than the others. You do not need to see the folder labels to understand that the thick stack documents 14 months of Thursday arrangements that cannot be explained as legitimate law enforcement activity. The recess lasts 12 minutes. DeLuca returns without his attorney, and the interview resumes with Garrett asking questions that require shorter answers. DeLuca nods frequently. He points to specific lines in documents that Garrett has marked with paper tabs. The pace accelerates. At 3:40, Garrett closes the final folder and extends his hand across the table. DeLuca shakes it once and stands. The interview concludes at 3:43 Thursday afternoon, after 90 minutes of methodical documentation of operational arrangements that federal law does not recognize as legitimate enforcement practice. You remain at your desk. The elevated train passes again at 3:48. The other agents leave the district office between 5 and 5:30 Thursday evening. Agent Morrison collects his hat from the rack by the door. The clerk locks the filing cabinet and descends the stairwell. District Supervisor Harold Meck exits his office at 5:20 without speaking to anyone, and walks to the elevated train station with the measured pace of someone who has calculated exactly which decisions can still be made, and which outcomes have already been determined by documentation he cannot alter. You remain at your desk. Through the conference room window, Treasury Inspector Samuel Garrett sits alone, organizing documents into folders labeled with agent names written in careful block letters that make identification efficient for whoever will process the termination paperwork in Washington. He works with the unhurried precision of someone who has completed 47 corruption investigations and understands that thorough documentation prevents appeals. The elevated train passes at 5:48. The mechanical rhythm carries through the empty office with clarity that afternoon noise usually obscures. Garrett does not look up from his work. His methodical sorting continues without reference to the clock or the dimming October light outside the conference room window. One folder sits separate from the others. The folder is thicker than any other folder on the table. You understand without seeing the label that the thick folder documents your 14 months of Thursday arrangements with Frank DeLuca. The office is quiet except for the scratch of Garrett's pen on folder labels and the distant rumble of trains maintaining their 12-minute intervals. The consistency has marked every evening for 18 months. The trains will continue their schedule regardless of which agents remain employed by the Bureau of Prohibition after Friday morning's findings presentation. The schedule does not depend on individual enforcement records or bank deposit patterns, or careful arrangements that seemed separate when created and connected, now that audit files demonstrate systematic correlation between unreported income and operational decisions that diverge from official reports. At 6:15, Garrett stands and walks to the window. He looks south toward the district where 30,000 speakeasies operate with the visibility of legitimate establishments. The city lights begin their evening illumination. Garrett returns to the table and continues organizing documentation. His pace does not change. His attention does not waver. He is a man who has spent 17 years in federal service and understands that corruption investigations require neither urgency nor emotion. They require documentation and systematic comparison of what agents report and what financial records reveal. You sit at your desk in the empty office. The October air through the open window carries the temperature of something that will require furnace heat by next week. Not yet. The stack of Thursday envelopes in your jacket pocket represents income that cannot be explained through bureau salary. The bank accounts established under your wife's maiden name and your brother's name, and the fabricated business entity called Lakeside Commercial Services document deposits that match the collection schedule that Frank DeLuca has now confirmed in 90 minutes of methodical testimony. The elevated train passes at 6 o'clock, then 6:12, then 6:24. The mechanical intervals continue with the reliability of something that does not depend on human decisions. Inspector Garrett presents his findings Friday morning at 8 o'clock. In District Supervisor Harold Meck's office. You attend along with agents Thomas Riley and James Kovac. The conference room that held yesterday's interview with Frank DeLuca now holds 4 federal agents whose employment will terminate before noon, based on documentation Garrett has organized into folders that sit on Meck's desk, in alphabetical order. Garrett speaks without referring to notes. The findings document systematic corruption involving advance raid notice, liquor release arrangements, and cash payments totaling $46,000 across 4 agents over 18 months. The documentation includes bank deposit records, confiscation logs that diverge from disposal documentation, and testimony from Frank DeLuca confirming the operational structure of Thursday envelope collections that you established in March 1925 and maintained without incident until the audit files arrived from Washington. Meck sits behind his desk, with the careful stillness of someone who has understood since October 14th that this presentation represents conclusion rather than negotiation. Agent Riley watches Garrett, with the attention of someone calculating whether defense serves any purpose when documentation is thorough enough that contradiction creates additional liability. Agent Kovac looks at the folders on Meck's desk. You watch Garrett complete his presentation with the methodical precision of someone who has terminated 47 agents and understands that efficiency serves federal interests more effectively than extended discussion. The findings recommend immediate termination for you, District Supervisor Harold Meck, Agent Thomas Riley, and Agent James Kovac. The recommendation includes referral to the Justice Department for criminal prosecution consideration, based on the systematic nature of the documented corruption, and the calculated gap between official enforcement reports and actual operational practice. Garrett closes the final folder at 8:17 Friday morning. The presentation has lasted 17 minutes. No questions follow the presentation. Questions would require explanations that documentation has already rendered irrelevant. Meck signs the termination papers at 8:20. The elevated train passes outside the window with its familiar mechanical rhythm. The sound carries through the office with the same consistency it carried Thursday evening and every evening for 18 months, before Treasury Inspector Samuel Garrett arrived from Washington, with sealed audit files that compared what agents reported and what bank accounts revealed. You stand. The October morning air through the window is cold enough now that furnace heat will be required by evening. The Thursday envelope in your jacket pocket that you collected last week and have not yet distributed to the 3 bank accounts weighs 4 ounces. The weight will not change. The envelope will remain in your jacket pocket as evidence during criminal prosecution consideration. The specific 4 ounces that represent 14 months of operational arrangements that federal law does not recognize as legitimate enforcement practice. The papers require your signature, acknowledging that you understand the charges of accepting bribes, providing advance raid notice, and releasing confiscated evidence in exchange for payment. Each charge is accurate and documented with specific dates and amounts. You sign the papers with the focused attention of a man who has learned to read only what is written there, a skill you learned from District Supervisor Harold Meck, who is signing his own termination papers 3 desks away. The pen scratches across the signature line. Your hand moves with the practiced steadiness of someone who has signed federal documentation for 18 months without error. The signature looks exactly like the signature on your badge application in March 1925. Same slant, same pressure, same careful formation of letters that will now appear on termination records rather than arrest reports. Meck finishes signing his papers at 9:42. He stands, collects the documents, walks them to the clerk's desk at the front of the room. The clerk accepts them without comment. Meck returns to his desk and begins removing personal items from the drawers. A fountain pen, a photograph of his wife, a pocket watch that belonged to his father. You continue reading the termination paperwork. Page 3 lists the bank deposits. 3 separate accounts. Dates and amounts that match the Thursday envelope collection schedule with the precision of something that was always going to be discovered. The fabricated business entity Lakeside Commercial Services appears on page 4, with incorporation date and postal box number. Page 5 lists the speakeasies where advance raid notice was provided in exchange for regular payments. Inspector Garrett sits at the conference room table, reviewing files. Through the frosted glass you can see his silhouette moving between documents, with the methodical pace of someone who has completed this process 47 times in 18 months across 6 districts. The review continues. The elevated train passes on the tracks 2 blocks north. You finish reading the termination papers at 9:58. All charges are documented. All evidence is recorded. All conclusions are supported by bank records, enforcement statistics, and testimony from Frank DeLuca, who provided specific dates and amounts during his interview yesterday afternoon. The other agents in the district office work at their desks, with the focused attention of men who understand that professional operations continue regardless of personnel changes. Agent Morrison files arrest reports. Agent Sullivan reviews raid schedules. Agent Chen processes confiscation documentation. The work continues at standard tempo. You stand, collect the termination papers, walk them to the clerk's desk at the front of the room. The clerk accepts them at 10 o'clock. She adds them to the stack that already contains Harold Meck's termination papers and the termination papers of 11 other agents whose deposit patterns matched yours during the 6-month audit period. The stack represents 18 months of operational arrangements that federal law does not recognize as legitimate business practices. You return to your desk. Begin removing personal items from the drawers. The cardboard box the clerk provided sits on the desk surface. You place items in the box with the careful attention of someone who has been trained to document evidence properly. A coffee cup. A calendar. The fountain pen you used to sign arrest reports that listed confiscation amounts that did not match the amounts recorded in the basement storage ledger. The district office is quiet except for the mechanical sounds of work continuing. Typewriters. Filing cabinets. The telegraph machine in the corner that receives raid coordination messages from other districts. The elevated train passes again at 10:12. Harold Meck leaves the federal building at 10:20 carrying a cardboard box containing personal items from his desk. He does not speak to anyone on his way out. The door closes behind him with the firm click of something that will not open again for him. You finish packing the cardboard box at 10:30. The box contains everything from your desk that belong to you personally, rather than to the Bureau of Prohibition. The weight is lighter than you expected. The elevated train rumbles past on the track above the street. You board at Clark and Lake at 11:45, with the cardboard box tucked under one arm. The platform is crowded with workers leaving for lunch and returning from errands. None of them know that you have just been terminated from federal employment for corruption. The train moves south through the district. The windows frame the buildings you have worked in for 18 months, the speakeasies you raided, the establishments where you collected Thursday envelopes, the banks where you made deposits under names that were not your own. You sit near the rear door. The cardboard box rests on your lap. Inside, the coffee cup, the calendar, the fountain pen. Objects that belong to you in a building you will not enter again. Other passengers read newspapers. A woman with shopping bags. A man in a business suit reviewing documents. A young couple speaking quietly. The mechanical rhythm of the elevated train continues beneath their conversations. The city moves past the windows at the steady pace of something that does not pause for individual terminations. 30,000 speakeasies continue operations. The Thursday envelope collection system continues under different management. The gap between official enforcement reports and actual operational practice continues, because the system was designed to produce that gap. You transfer at Roosevelt at 12:15. The southbound platform is quieter than the northbound platform. The afternoon light carries the pale quality of October sun through industrial smoke. The next train arrives in 4 minutes according to the schedule board. Frank DeLuca's establishment is 16 blocks west of here, the storage room behind the kitchen where Thursday envelope exchanges occurred for 14 months. the ledger in his safe that documented dates and amounts with the careful precision of legitimate business accounting. The testimony he provided to Inspector Garrett that matched bank deposits you made to 3 separate Chicago banks. The train arrives. You board. The doors close with the pneumatic hiss of something final. The residential neighborhoods appear at 12:28. Tree-lined streets. Apartment buildings with laundry hanging from fire escapes. Children playing in vacant lots. The elevated train runs above it all, at the consistent altitude of something that maintains distance from ground-level complications. You reach your stop at 12:45. The platform is empty except for an elderly woman waiting for the northbound train. You descend the stairs with the cardboard box. The street below carries the afternoon quiet of a residential neighborhood where most adults are at work. Your apartment building is 3 blocks east. The walk takes 7 minutes at the steady pace of someone who has nowhere particular to be. The cardboard box grows heavier, not because its contents have changed, because the weight of federal employment no longer balances it. You reach the building at 12:52. The front door needs paint. The lobby smells like the cabbage someone cooked for lunch. The stairs to the 3rd floor creak, with the familiar sound of something you have climbed twice daily for 18 months. The apartment door is locked. You balance the cardboard box against your hip while you work the key. The mechanism turns. The door opens. You place the cardboard box on the kitchen table. Your wife looks up from the dishes she is washing. The afternoon light through the window frames her in pale October clarity. "Why are you home early?" your wife said. "I have been terminated from federal employment for accepting bribes from speakeasy owners," you said. She sits down without speaking. The chair scrapes against the linoleum with a sound that continues longer than necessary. The apartment is quiet except for the water still running in the sink. You walk over and turn off the tap. The silence that follows has weight. Your wife's hands rest on the table surface. They are still damp from dishwater. The wedding ring on her left hand catches the light from the window. She signed bank documents using her maiden name without understanding what the deposits represented. "The Thursday envelope," you said. She looks at the table surface rather than at you. The understanding moves across her face, with the slow recognition of something that was always there but never named. The deposit amounts that exceeded your federal salary. The fabricated business entity that existed only on incorporation papers. The careful explanations about consulting work that required separate accounting. The elevated train passes 2 blocks away. The apartment windows rattle briefly. The sound fades into the afternoon stillness that has always been there beneath the mechanical intervals. You sit down across from her. The cardboard box sits between you on the table. Inside, objects that belong to you in a building you will not enter again. Outside, the city continuing its operations without pause for individual terminations. Your wife speaks without looking at you. "How long?" 14 months. The number sits in the air between you. 14 months of Thursday envelopes. 14 months of deposits made under names that were not yours. 14 months of operational arrangements that federal law does not recognize as legitimate business practices. She stands, walks to the window, looks out at the street below, where afternoon continues at its regular pace. Children playing. A delivery truck making its rounds. The elevated train passing again at its scheduled interval. The apartment holds the stillness of something waiting, not for resolution, for the simple progression of time that will carry this moment into the past where it will join all the other moments that cannot be changed. You open the cardboard box. Remove the coffee cup. Place it in the cabinet where it belonged before it went to the district office 18 months ago. The calendar goes in the trash. The fountain pen goes in the drawer with the other pens that will be used for purposes that do not require federal documentation. Your wife remains at the window. The afternoon light frames her silhouette against the glass. Outside, the city continues. Inside, the stillness deepens into something that feels almost like rest. The kitchen table sits in the same place it occupied this morning. The lamp overhead casts the same light it cast last week. $19,600 distributed across 3 accounts. First National, under your wife's maiden name, holds $7,200. Continental Trust, under your brother's name, holds $6,800. Lakeside Commercial Services maintains $5,600 in the business account that exists only as incorporation papers and a postal box. The withdrawal schedule requires coordination. Banks limit large cash removals. Questions follow amounts above certain thresholds. The teller who processes a $7,000 withdrawal on Monday morning will remember the transaction when federal investigators arrive on Tuesday afternoon. 3 days to move the money, 5 business days after that before Treasury can freeze the accounts once charges are filed. The U.S. Attorney needs documentation. Documentation requires time. Time measured now in the hours between Friday evening and the moment someone signs the seizure order. Your wife enters from the bedroom. She stops in the doorway. "What happens next?" your wife said. You set down the pencil. The calculations on the paper remain incomplete. Criminal charges are possible but not certain. Termination from federal employment makes future employment difficult. References are required. Terminated agents do not receive favorable references, you said. She moves to the chair across from you. Her hands rest on the table surface. The lamp overhead hums with the mechanical consistency of electrical current through a filament. Outside the window, the elevated train passes on its regular schedule. 9:47. The same route it traveled yesterday evening. The same route it will travel tomorrow evening, regardless of what the U.S. Attorney decides about filing charges. She looks at the paper with its columns of numbers. "Where do we go?" she said. The question has a practical answer. Cities exist where federal employment records carry less weight. Where a man with accounting experience and 18 months in Chicago can find work that does not require explanation of why he left his previous position. Minneapolis. Detroit. Cities where the district offices do not share information frequently. Quote, "You said." She nods once. Her eyes remain on the numbers. The pencil lies beside the paper. The calculations show deposit dates and withdrawal limits, and the number of days between Friday evening and the moment the accounts become inaccessible. Mathematics that function independent of whether the system that produced them was legal or merely efficient. The lamp hums. The elevated train fades into distance. The kitchen remains exactly as it was when you sat down to calculate what remains of 14 months of Thursday envelopes that weighed 4 ounces every week without variation, because Frank DeLuca understood that consistency was evidence of reliable business practices. Your wife stands. Her hand touches your shoulder briefly. "I'll start packing," she said. She returns to the bedroom. Her footsteps move, with the certainty of someone who understands that decisions made Friday evening become irreversible by Monday morning, when the banks open and questions begin about why an account held for 18 months is suddenly being emptied in a single transaction. You fold the paper. The calculations are complete enough. The rest is execution, timing. The mechanical process of converting numbers on bank ledgers into cash that can be relocated before someone with authority to freeze accounts discovers that the Thursday envelope deposits match the enforcement pattern gaps that Inspector Garrett's audit revealed. The lamp continues its hum. The apartment building door closes behind you with the weight of wood against frame. October air moves through the street with the temperature of something preparing for winter. Not cold yet. The threshold between seasons where coats become necessary rather than optional. 2 blocks away, the elevated train passes with the rumble that marks 10 o'clock with mechanical precision, the same sound that marked 10 o'clock last night. The sound that will mark 10 o'clock tomorrow night when you are no longer in this apartment on this street, in this city, where Thursday envelopes structured 14 months of operational rhythm. The sidewalk extends north toward the district, where speakeasies continue their business, with the same visibility they maintained before Inspector Garrett arrived. The same visibility they will maintain after you leave. Federal enforcement creates temporary disruptions. The district adjusts. Business continues with minor modifications to account for which agents accept payments, and which agents require termination before their testimonies become evidence. A couple passes walking south. Their conversation carries the casual tone of people discussing where to have dinner, not whether charges will be filed, not whether employment termination extends to criminal prosecution. The elevated train fades into distance. The mechanical intervals continue independent of human concerns about bank accounts or audit files, or whether Minneapolis offers employment opportunities for men whose references cannot explain why they left federal service after 18 months. Wind moves between the buildings. October wind carrying the smell of the lake 2 miles east. Water that will freeze by January and remain frozen until March, regardless of what happens to the accounts at First National and Continental Trust and Lakeside Commercial Services. Your hands rest in your coat pockets. The interior pocket where the Thursday envelope sat every week for 14 months now holds only the lining fabric, 4 ounces absent. The specific weight that marked the difference between enforcement operations that produced arrests and enforcement operations that produced advance notice for establishments that paid for the service. The couple's voices fade south. Consistency extends beyond individual decisions. The Thursday envelope system operated because multiple agents participated. Because Frank DeLuca maintained relationships with 12 federal employees, whose enforcement activity created the pattern that Inspector Garrett's audit detected. The system was not one man accepting payment. The system was the accepted operational standard for a district office, where salary did not match the cost of maintaining professional appearance in a city where speakeasies generated more revenue than most legitimate businesses. You understand this, have understood it since District Supervisor Harold Meck explained the arrangement during your second week in Chicago. The envelope is not corruption. The envelope is compensation adjustment for work performed in conditions where official salary calculations fail to account for actual operational expenses. The explanation sounded reasonable in March 1925. Sounds less reasonable on Friday evening, October 1926, when the accounts holding 14 months of compensation adjustments await withdrawal before federal seizure. The elevated train passes again. 10:30. The sound continues north into the district where establishments remain open, and agents continue their enforcement operations, and Thursday envelopes continue circulating because the system that produced them was never one inspector's arrival, but the structural gap between what federal employment pays and what Chicago living costs. The wind carries chimney smoke now, furnaces activated for the first time this season, preparation for winter that continues regardless of personal circumstance. The bedroom is dark except for the small lamp on the dresser. Your jacket hangs on the chair where you placed it an hour ago. The wool fabric holds the shape of shoulders and arms. The cigar smoke from the district office. The October air from the walk home. The interior pocket sits empty. 14 months of Thursday envelopes. 4 ounces every week. The weight became familiar. Something your hand checked without conscious thought. The envelope present meant the week followed its expected pattern. The envelope absent meant disruption, requiring explanation. Now permanently absent. Your wife is already asleep. Her breathing carries the steady rhythm of someone whose decisions are made. Packing completed. Minneapolis or Detroit decided in whatever internal calculation she performed, while folding clothes and placing them in the trunk, that will accompany you to whatever city offers employment for men whose previous position cannot be explained in reference letters. You remove your jacket. The fabric weighs what wool fabric weighs, nothing more. The Thursday envelope weight will never return. Federal employment terminated means the arrangement that produced those envelopes no longer applies to you, regardless of whether it continues applying to other agents whose accounts have not yet been flagged by auditors from Washington. The jacket hangs on the chair. The lamp on the dresser casts steady light, electrical current through filament. No knowledge of bank accounts or audit files, or whether criminal charges follow employment termination. Outside, the elevated train passes. 10:30. The mechanical rumble that marked every night for 18 months now marks a night that is not identical to previous nights, because Friday evening established that Monday morning requires bank withdrawals, and Tuesday afternoon requires departure, and next Friday evening will occur in a different city, where elevated trains follow different schedules. Your wife's breathing continues its rhythm. The weight of absence is specific. 4 ounces represents $140 bills folded twice. Frank DeLuca's careful preparation. The envelope, always the same dimensions. The same thickness. Professional consistency that minimized attention. An envelope that looked like business correspondence carried the same security as business correspondence. No special handling required. No questions about contents. Gone now. You understand that gone is permanent. Thursday envelopes depended on operational relationships that terminated the moment Inspector Garrett opened sealed audit files. The money in 3 bank accounts represents compensation already received. What remains is converting paper records into cash, before paper records become frozen assets awaiting criminal trial. The lamp continues its light. The elevated train passes at 10:30. Distance reduces it to rumble and vibration, the sound that marked every night, the same mechanical intervals. The same route through the district where Thursday envelopes continued circulating and enforcement operations continued producing advance raid notices and speakeasies continued operating because the system was larger than individual agents. Your wife sleeps. The lamp is off now. Darkness complete except for the gap under the door where hallway light marks the boundary between this room and the rest of the building. 4 ounces. The specific weight of $140 bills folded twice. Frank DeLuca's professional standard. $1,400 monthly. $16,800 annually. The arithmetic that seemed reasonable when District Supervisor Harold Meck explained that salary adjustments occurred outside official channels, because official channels could not acknowledge the actual cost of enforcement operations in Chicago. The weight remained consistent, every Thursday envelope identical. Consistency was DeLuca's business practice. Variables created attention. Attention created investigation. Investigation created the audit files that Inspector Garrett carried from Washington, in sealed containers, that revealed what agents believed remained separate from official documentation. The Thursday envelope weighed 4 ounces every week without variation. This precision mattered, because precision was evidence of reliable business practices. DeLuca operated establishments that generated revenue requiring professional management. The Thursday envelope was not payment for illegal services. The Thursday envelope was subscription fee for business consulting that happened to involve advance notice of federal enforcement activity. The distinction mattered in March 1925. Matters less now. The elevated train fades into distance. The mechanical rumble continues north into the district, where establishments remain open, and business continues, and Thursday envelopes circulate among the agents whose accounts have not yet been flagged for investigation. Your breathing slows. The darkness is complete. The hallway light under the door remains constant. The building settles into the stillness of late evening, when most residents are already sleeping, and the elevated train intervals become the only marker of time continuing its forward movement, regardless of individual circumstances. 4 ounces. The weight is gone now. The calculation complete. 14 months of Thursday envelopes converted into $19,600, distributed across 3 accounts that will be withdrawn Monday morning before federal authority can freeze them. The money will relocate to Minneapolis or Detroit. The apartment will be vacated. The operational arrangements that structured 18 months in Chicago will dissolve into the category of employment history that cannot be explained in reference letters. The calculation is finished. Your breathing deepens into the rhythm of someone whose decisions are made and whose remaining task is sleep.